Standing guard for Snoke, here's your look at the new Diamond Select Star Wars. This is the Praetorian Guard. Clad in ornate crimson armor, these warriors guarded Supreme Leader Snoke, ready to meet any threat with a savage response. The guard consisted of 8 sentinels divided into 4 pairs, with each pair brandishing unique weapons. Their red armor was a deliberate echo of that worn by Emperor Palpatine's royal protectors. The guard attacked Kylo Ren and Rey after the death of Snoke, with all 8 falling in battle. Designed, modeled, and prototyped using top-of-the-line 3D technology, this 1/6 scale statue is hand-cast, hand-painted, and hand-numbered with a limited edition certificate of authenticity. May the Force be with you. The Praetorian Guard is limited to a very small quantity of only 1,000 pieces worldwide. I suppose logically, the first thing we will want to be doing is figure out how tall this stands. After all, I always do this because I want to provide you guys the best service available, and if you're obviously looking to pick up this one for yourself, don't blame you. You probably want to know how tall this thing stands so that you know you can fit it on a shelf or wherever you decide you want to put it. According to the tape measure, if I'm looking at this correctly, you're looking at the Praetorian Guard standing 13.1 inches in height. And in centimeters, that works out to be 33.4 centimeters tall. If you manage to pick up this one for yourself and you manage to open up the box successfully, your checklist of contents will include the Praetorian Guard, a rather reflective display base. We'll look at that also in a second as well, and the Bellari Electro Chain Whip. We also will be treated to, thanks to the folks over at Diamond Select, a trading card. Trading card sort of downplays what this actually is, because on the back side, it's actually also a certificate of authenticity. On the front, it shows you what the statue is going to look like. It's interesting that the base here looks brown instead of black. Probably for the fact that the familiar use of the black and the alternating gray, they wanted to keep at least the base something to stand out. So that's probably why they used it brown in the picture. On the back, though, you have this Certificate of Authenticity, Star Wars Praetorian Guard, 1/6 scale statue. This is a Gentle Giant and now Diamond Select, because Diamond Select handles all of Gentle Giant releases. You'll also notice this one is out of a very limited amount of 1,000 copies worldwide. Astute viewers will also notice the fact that it's got 0. There's nothing written right here. Well, this one was actually provided by the folks over at Diamond Select as a sample copy, so that's why we're having a look at it right here. And that's one of the reasons also as well that you won't see a numbered sequence anywhere in place on the back of the Certificate of Authenticity here. Checklist time, check off on the box for the contents to be the display base. I already told you it is a really reflective display base, and you can probably already see there's my ceiling right there. There's my light. You can see how reflective it actually is. And along with that, of course, goes the hassles and heartaches of actually having something that retains fingerprints. Periodically, I would most definitely recommend taking a cloth and just kind of wiping down the surface so that obviously things like fingerprints won't be such a noticeable thing on this particular base. You do have 2 connecting peg holes, which will go with the 2 connecting pegs that are on the underside of the Praetorian Guard. And if we just flip the stand upside down, You are treated to Gentle Giant Limited Star Wars Praetorian Guard 1/6 scale statue, along with the same sequence number out of 1,000 that was on the back certificate of authenticity. You've also got yourself 4 felt feet. Periodically, I use the term felt feet, but actually in this case, it's more rubberized feet than anything else. These little circular tabs of rubber certainly would prevent scratching if you put this on furniture and any place where you don't want to cause damage if you are certainly moving around the statue. I would believe once you do have this in a place that you want to keep it permanently displayed, the likelihood of you actually shifting this around would be slim to none, but at the very least you've got rubberized feet on the underside to prevent scratching from happening. 2 halves certainly make a whole, but in this case it's not quite a half, it's quite a bit longer than a half. If this was, I would say this probably be like 5/8. 5/8 included of a Bellari Electro Chain Whip, of course the weapon of choice for this Praetorian Guard. It's a nice looking piece, short of the fact it doesn't have the electricity running through it. This will be something that he's only going to have at salutes. He's not going to be actually using it, so therefore the chain whip is not active, it's not working, and it's not sectioned off from one another. You can sort of see how things would be detached from one another, removing and separating themselves at these points right here, and then of course the electricity would be running through it. In this case, it's attached by a silver peg. This dowel is going to fit on the underside of the hilt of the actual chain whip that the Praetorian Guard is holding. It was a lot easier of me simply just showing you this before we actually sort of start getting everything together, because once we get everything together, the Praetorian Guard statue is quite considerably heavy. Probably for that reason, it would make more sense to look at the Praetorian Guard in hand, and then I'll show you how it attaches in place. It certainly is a lot lighter without the means of having to install the base just yet, but you can kind of see how everything tabs into place. 2 metal dowels on the underside of one of the Praetorian Guard's feet that will go into the supply 2 holes on the circular base. And don't worry, we'll show you that in a second as well. As for the Praetorian Guard, what a neat looking display. Ironically enough, and maybe that's where my soft spot comes into play when it comes to the Praetorian Guard, is the fact that when I was first growing up, the only time I was growing up, and collecting Star Wars figures, vividly remember going to Kmart, vividly remembering having my allowance in hand. I had choice of very limited selection of figures in front of me. They had already been pretty much picked over, and I chose one figure. One figure with my allowance, and anybody want to take a guess as to maybe what it was? It was the Emperor's Royal Guard. Ever since then, I've, like I said, had quite a soft spot for the design, the crimson red color scheme of the armor of the Royal Guard. And maybe that's why I like so much the Praetorian Guard. Now, this specific guard, again, keeping in mind there were 8 of them, this is the 3rd guard, which would have also a secondary guard. So each one of these guards would have their corresponding other guard that didn't have a number to it, and each one of them, or both pairings of them, would have the same weapon. And in this case, it would have been the chain whip. The chain whip just attaches to the underside right there, but I'm not going to do it just yet, because makes more sense really to attach it and then put it to the base, because that's when you want to finish off everything. I've got a little bit of styrofoam. We can quickly remove that. One thing that's noted on this particular design, well, one thing that's interesting about all the Praetorian Guards is that they have unique armor. As much as they have unique weapons, they also have unique designed armor. Still all in the very bloodshot, blood red color. Again, it's more of a crimson color than anything else, but the designs do drastically change, specifically also in their helmets. What I do really like about them is they almost have like a samurai feel to them. They kind of look like, remind me a bit of the Destroyer as well from the Thor universe. Again, 2 completely different universes, surprisingly enough, both owned by Disney. What I really like is the fact that he has the cascading scales of armor that run down the sides of both his arms. The arms are in a bent formation, of course, for the fact that the whip is going to be relaxed, and he's sort of holding it more so as a staff. There's a point on the top there that's been painted in silver, and a little bit of silver also on the side of the hilt. Other than that, though, all the coloring on this guy is red, and you would think to yourself, all that red gets awfully boring. And actually it doesn't. And why it doesn't is the fact that the type of red that they use does change drastically. If you look at the top here, the top is done in a very reflective, shiny manner. You get a one little square of blue and a corresponding red square next to it, which you barely can see because so much of it is done in red. But as you move further down to the skirting of the Praetorian Guard, you really see not only is the coloring and the sheen drastically reduced here versus up at the top here, but they've also added all this additional texturing to it, which I'm trying to use my best way to describe the texturing. The only thing I could really come up with, and apologies for that, is it kind of has the surface of an orange. You can see right there, and hopefully the camera is going to do proper justice to it, the varying degrees of texturing that they added to the surface of the skirting here. The skirt is rather quite long, making up the majority of the figure's body. The underside does have the black soles on the boots, sort of does help to break that up as well, but the black really does get lost once you add this to the actual display base itself. We spin the statue around. You can now see why it made a lot more sense to simply just hold the statue in hand. You have some additional texturing on the back where this part would have not likely been armored. If anything, this would have just been the neck collar for the suit that's underneath that. Again, you get very much the idea of the stormtrooper design of armor, but very much still feels and reads to me like samurai armor as well. It's a really neat and very reflective surface. I can see so much of myself and all the things around me being reflected off the surface of the actual armor itself. When the time comes to put the statue together, I've noticed it makes a lot more sense to install the whip first. Before then, you take the statue of the Praetorian Guard and put him on top of his base. The reasoning for that is once you do put him down on the base, it doesn't really give a lot of clearance because you have to put the whip in from the bottom. Before you also jump too quickly at the idea of putting it in place, thinking that it's simply just a dowel lining up to a hole, there's a little bit more to it than just that. The shape of the square also will dictate the way that you put the whip in. I've noticed it fits. Obviously, you don't want to be putting it sideways like this. You want to be putting it lengthwise. I suppose in that regard, it's kind of more closer resembling a rectangle than an actual perfect square. But when you do put it in, there's one way you'll do it, and it won't, if you can see it right there, will leave a gap. As much pressure as force as you want to put into obviously a statue like this, which you all want to be careful in the first place, you'll want to spin it around and put it in the opposite way. And as you can see, this is now simply just friction keeping everything in place. The whip itself goes further past the point of his feet. All the more reasoning why you definitely want to be putting the whip in first before you attach the Praetorian Guard to its display base. Then you're going to take the metal dowels. One is longer than the other, and you're going to want to put it into the base. One thing you will want to be making sure of first is that you've got it in the proper placement. Obviously, the dowels are only going to be on the left side of the statue, so you want to twist and turn the base accordingly so you line up those holes. Once that's in place, you just line it up over those holes, those slots, and you just very carefully leave it, let it slide down into place, and then you've got the statue all ready to go. Once the statue gets put together, you're presented with a rather premium looking piece. That's a lot of P's. I think a lot of the contributor is what adds to it feeling so polished is the fact that the flooring, like Snoke's throne room, does have that reflective black sheen to it. It really does finish this nicely. I think it could have worked just as well if the base itself was just simply matte black, but adding that reflective mirrored sheen really does bring this up a bit. It's a premier, like I said, premium statue. And the good thing about it is also as well is the fact that it's a 6-scale rendition of the Praetorian Guard. Ergo, what that also means is if you never got a chance to pick up, or I don't even know where they are right now, the Praetorian Guards on a 6-scale level, but this fits in perfectly with your 6-scale figures. It's sort of strange, the idea of mixing and matching your different collectibles together. But again, the fact that this is a 6-scale rendition, most definitely you could fit that along in with your other Star Wars 6-scale figures. Supreme Leader Snoke had 8 of these Praetorian Guards. There was a 1st guard, a 3rd guard, and a 7th guard. whatever reasoning, the other 5 guards were unnamed, but they worked in unison, grouping themselves into 4 pairs of 2, and they each had unique weapons. Or I think the groupings of the 2, each of the pair had their own unique weapons to one another. It certainly does beg the question, if this is the 3rd guard, if we are still going to be getting ourselves a 1st guard and a 7th guard in the same 6 scale treatment that Diamond Select and Gentle Giant were able to do with the 3rd guard right here. This is a glorious looking piece. Biased perhaps by the very notion that I did pick up the Emperor's Royal Guard. Of all things, when you really think about it, my very first Star Wars figure was a Return of the Jedi Royal Guard, an Emperor's Royal Guard to be exact. What a strange decision I made when I was a small child. Nonetheless, that was one of the reasonings why I gravitated so much towards the Praetorian Guards, because they're definitely a hark back, a throwback, if you will, to the original Emperor's Royal Guard from Return of the Jedi. Though they didn't fare necessarily well against Rey or, of course, Kylo Ren, nonetheless, they did have definitely a very memorable look to them, and the battle itself, though short, was pretty cool to see all the various Praetorian Guards, each with their own unique weapon. If you managed to pick up this one for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of it. Or, based on this review, maybe you haven't picked it up just yet, but based on this review and this review alone, what do you guys think of the new Gentle Giant Diamond Select Star Wars Praetorian Guard 1/6 scale statue? And yes, in fact, Virginia, there's a Santa Claus, and you could pose this one with your 6 scale figures. Is that blasphemy, the idea of putting a statue with 6 scale figures? It's possible. You could do it. Why not? It's 6 scales after all. It's all the same format and size, guys. Anyways, a big thank you to the folks over at Diamond Select who were very nice enough to provide this sample copy that we had to look at in this review. If you guys want to get a gander at some of the other stuff that Diamond Select is churning out, will be churning out in the coming months, might I recommend that you swing on over to their YouTube homepage. I'll provide the link down below in the video description, and you can check out all the stuff that's going to be hitting store shelves soon. You'll kind of get the first glance sneak peek over on their YouTube channel. Speaking of YouTube channels, and a bit of a plug for my own, if you guys are new to this channel, liking my content, like to see more of my content, and like to be notified when new content is made available, might I also suggest that you hit that subscribe button down below. Might I also suggest that you turn on the bell notification. And if you don't mind me asking, might I also ask that you swing on over to the homepage and see if there's any videos along the way that you may have missed out on. We're going to have a look at some upcoming statue reviews in the coming weeks, the coming months, and maybe looking deep into the future. I don't know. Could it be a little more clearer than Rey's? It's possible. There's going to be a whole lot of videos coming soon in the future years to come as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.